And we should not be imposing these devastating defense cuts, because what that does, when we equivocate on our values, when we show that we're cutting our own defense, it makes us more weak. It projects weakness, and when we look weak, our adversaries are much more willing to test us. They're more brazen in their attacks, and our allies are less willing to trust us.
With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
And why is that so?
Because not a single thing he said is accurate. First of all...
Be specific.
I will be very specific. Number one, this lecture on embassy security. The congressman here cut embassy security in his budget by $300 million below what we asked for, number one. So much for the embassy security piece. Number two.
Should the U.S. have apologized for Americans burning Qurans in Afghanistan? Should the U.S. apologize for U.S. Marines urinating on Taliban corpses?
Oh, gosh, yes. Urinating on Taliban corpses? What we should not apologize for.
Burning Qurans immediately.
What we should not be apologizing for are standing up for our values. What we should not be doing is saying to the Egyptian people, while Mubarak is cracking down on them, that he's a good guy, and then the next week say he ought to go. Under a Romney administration, we will have credibility on this issue.
Vice President Biden.
It's incredible.
Martha, let's look at this from the view of the Ayatollahs. What do they see? They see this administration trying to water down sanctions in Congress for over 2 years. They're moving faster toward a nuclear weapon. They're spinning the centrifuges faster. They see us saying when we come into the administration, when they're sworn in, we need more space with our ally Israel. We can debate the timeline. We can debate the timeline, whether it's that short a time or longer. I agree that it's probably longer. Number two, it's all about credibility.
You don't agree with that bomb and what the Israelis might do.
Look, we both,
Vice President
I don't want to go into classified stuff, but we both agree that to do this peacefully, you got to get them to change their minds. They're not changing their minds, and look at what this administration does.
Let me tell you what the Ayatollah sees. The Ayatollah sees his economy being crippled in stark relief and detail about what's going on. This is a bunch of stuff. Look, here's the deal.
What does that mean, a bunch of stuff?
Well, it means it's simply inaccurate.
It's Irish.
It's Irish. It is. We Irish call it malarkey.
Thanks for the translation.
No, we Irish call it malarkey. But last thing, the Secretary of Defense, when they get to the point where they can enrich uranium enough to put into a weapon, they don't have a weapon to put it into. Let's all calm down a little bit here. Iran is more isolated today than when we took office. It was on the ascendancy when we took office. It is totally isolated. I don't know what world these guys are in.
Thank heavens we have these sanctions in place. It's in spite of their opposition.
Oh, God.
They've given 20 waivers to this sanction, and all I have to point to are the results. They're 4 years closer toward a nuclear weapon. I think that case speaks for itself.
Can you tell the American people what's worse, another war in the Middle East?
Oh, I didn't say, no, I'm not saying that. Facts matter, Martha. You're a foreign policy expert. Facts matter. All this loose talk about them, all they have to do is get to enrich uranium in a certain amount and they have a weapon. Not true. Not true. They are more, and if we ever have to take action, that's why these crippling sanctions with Bibi Netanyahu says we should continue, which, if I'm not mistaken, Governor Romney says we should continue. If I may be mistaken, he changed his mind so often, I could be wrong. But the fact of the matter is he says they're working. And the fact is that they are being crippled by them. And in addition to that, when that occurred, what did Romney do? Romney said, no, let Detroit go bankrupt. We moved in and helped people refinance their homes. Governor Romney said, no, let foreclosures hit the bottom. But it shouldn't be surprising for a guy who says 47% of the American people are unwilling to take responsibility for their own lives. My friend recently in a speech in Washington said 30% of the American people are takers. These people are my mom and dad, the people I grew up with, my neighbors. They pay more effective tax than Governor Romney pays in his federal income tax. They are elderly people who, in fact, are living off of Social Security. There are veterans and people fighting in Afghanistan right now who are, quote, not paying any taxes. I've had it up to here with this notion that 47%, it's about time they take some responsibility here. And instead of signing pledges to Grover Norquist not to ask the wealthiest among us to contribute to bring back the middle class, they should be signing a pledge saying to the middle class, we're going to level the playing field.
That's how it's going all around America. Look.
You don't read the statistic. That's not how it's going. It's going down.
This is his 2-minute answer,
Look.
please.
Did they come in and inherit a tough situation? Absolutely. But we're going in the wrong direction. Look at where we are. Mitt Romney's a good man. He cares about 100% of Americans in this country. And with respect to that quote, I think the vice president very well knows that sometimes the words don't come out of your mouth the right way.
But I always say what I mean. And so does Romney.
We want everybody to succeed. We want to get people out of poverty, in the middle class, onto a life of self-sufficiency. We believe in opportunity and upward mobility. That's what we're going to push for in a Romney administration.
Vice President,
look,
I have a feeling you have a few things to say here.
The idea, if you heard that little soliloquy on 47%, you think he just made a mistake, then I think you're, I think I got a bridge to sell you. And by the way, they talk about this great recession if it fell out of the sky. Like, oh my goodness, where did it come from? It came from this man voting to put 2 wars in a credit card.
Over 100 criminal investigations that have been launched into just how stimulus spends are being spent.
Martha, look, his colleague runs an investigative committee, spent months and months and months going into this.
This is the Inspector General.
Months and months. They found no evidence of cronyism. And I love my friend here. I'm not allowed to show letters, but go on our website. He sent me 2 letters saying, by the way, can you send me some stimulus money for companies here in the state of Wisconsin? We sent millions of dollars. You know why he said
You did ask for stimulus money,
Sure he
correct?
did. By the way,
on 2 occasions, we advocated for constituents who are applying for grants. That's what we do. We do that for all constituents who are applying.
I love that. I love that. This is such a bad program, and he writes me a letter saying, writes the Department of Energy a letter saying, the reason we need this stimulus, it will create growth and jobs. His words. And now he's sitting here looking at me. And by the way, that program, again, investigated. What the Congress said was it was a model. Less than 0.4% waste or fraud in the program. And all this talk about cronyism. They investigated, did not find one single piece of evidence. I wish he would just be a little more candid.
Was it a good idea?
I think we've gone over this quite enough.
And by the way, any letter you send me, I'll entertain.
I appreciate that, Joe. Instead of 15 bureaucrats deciding what, if, where, when they get it.
Vice President Biden, 2 minutes.
You know, I heard that death panel argument from Sarah Palin. It seems every vice presidential debate I hear this kind of stuff about panels. But let's talk about Medicare. Imagine where all those seniors would be now if their money had been in the market. Their ideas are old and their ideas are bad, and they eliminate the guarantee of Medicare.
Here's the problem. They got caught with their hands in the cookie jar, turning Medicare into a piggy bank for Obamacare. Their own actuary from the administration came to Congress and said 1 out of 6 hospitals and nursing homes are going to go out of business as a result of this.
That's not what they said.
7.4 million seniors are projected to lose the current Medicare Advantage coverage they have. That's a $3,200 benefit cut.
That didn't
what we're
happen.
saying,
more people signed up.
These are from your own actuaries.
More people signed up for Medicare Advantage after the change.
What they're saying,
nobody is.
Mr. Vice President,
down.
I know,
no, this
Mr. Vice President, I know you're under a lot of duress to make up for lost ground. But I think people will be better served if we don't keep interrupting each other.
Well, don't take all the 4 minutes then.
We're saying don't change benefits for people 55 and above. They already organize their retirement around these promises.
Let me ask you this.
And the families I know, the families I come from, they don't have the money to pay more.
That's why we're saying more for lower income people and less for higher income people.
I would like to move on to a very simple question for both of you, and something tells me I won't get a very simple answer. But let me ask you this.
I gave you a simple answer. He's raising the cost of Medicare.
He'll keep saying this $5 trillion plan, I suppose. It's been discredited by 6 other studies, and even their own deputy campaign manager acknowledged that it wasn't correct.
Well, let's talk about this 20%. You have refused, and again, to offer specifics on how you pay for that 20% across-the-board tax cut. Do you actually have the specifics, or are you still working on it, and that's why you won't tell voters?
Different than this administration, we actually want to have big bipartisan agreements. You see, I understand
that. Do you have the specifics? Do you have the math? Do you know exactly what you're doing?
Congress.
Look at what Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did what we're saying is here's
I hope
the
I'm
framework.
going to get time to respond to this.
You'll get time.
We want to work with Congress on how best to achieve this. Work with Congress to do it.
And you guarantee this math will add up?
Absolutely. 6 studies have guaranteed. 6 studies have verified that this math adds up. But
Vice President Biden. Vice President Biden.
Let me translate. Let me have a chance to translate.
I'll come back in a second then, right?
First of all, I was there when Ronald Reagan tax breaks, when he gave specifics of what he was going to cut. Let's look at how sincere they are. Governor Romney on 60 Minutes, I guess it was about 10 days ago, was asked, Governor, you pay 14% on $20 million. Someone making $50,000 pays more than that. Do you think that's fair? He said, oh, yes, that's fair. That's fair. And they're going to talk about, you think these guys are going to go out there and cut those loopholes? That's why they arrive.
Is he wrong about that?
He is wrong about that. You can cut tax rates by 20% and still preserve these important preferences for middle-class taxpayers.
Not mathematically possible.
It is mathematically possible. It's been done before. It's precisely what we're proposing.
It has never been done before.
It's been done a couple of times, actually.
It has never been
Jack
done
Kennedy
before.
lowered tax rates, increased growth. Ronald Reagan.
Now you're Jack Kennedy.
Ronald Reagan. Republicans and Democrats have worked together on this about preventing.
So no massive.
No, we're saying
defense increase.
Okay, you want to get into defense now?
Yes, I
All
do.
right.
I do.
So,
because that's another math question.
Right, okay.
How do you do that?
So they proposed a $478 billion cut to defense to begin with.
And so the bipartisanship is what he voted for, to automatic cuts in defense if they didn't act. And beyond that, they asked for another. Look, the military says we need a smaller, leaner army. We need more special forces. We don't need more M1 tanks. What we need is more UAVs.
Some of the military. I know that's something.
Not some of the military. That was the decision of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, recommended to us and agreed to by the president.
Who answered to a civilian leader?
They made the recommendation first.
Okay. Vice
Martha,
President Biden.
let's keep our eye on the ball. The reason I've been in and out of Afghanistan and Iraq 20 times. I've been up in the Konar Valley. I've been throughout that whole country, mostly in a helicopter and sometimes in a vehicle. The fact is, we went there for one reason, to get those people who killed Americans, Al-Qaeda. We've decimated Al-Qaeda Central. We have eliminated Osama bin Laden. That was our purpose.
Let me go back to this. He says we're absolutely leaving in 2014. You're saying that's not an absolute, but you won't talk about what conditions would justify.
Do you know why we say that?
Because
we don't want to broadcast to our enemies, put a date on your calendar, wait us out, and then come back.
But you agree with the timeline.
We do agree. We do agree with the timeline and the transition. But what any administration will do in 2013 is assess the situation to see how best to complete this timeline. What we do not want to do
in 2014.
What we do not want to do is give our allies reason to trust us less. The calendar works the same every year.
It does work the same every year.
And spring, summer, fall. It's warm or it's not. They're still fighting us. They're still coming over the passes. They're still coming in to Zabul, to Kunar, to all of these areas, but we are sending fewer people to the front to fight them, and that's
right, because that's the Afghan responsibility. We've trained them.
Not in the East.
Let's move to another war.
Not in the East.
RC East,
the most dangerous place in the world.
That's why we don't want to send fewer people to do the job.
That's why we should send Americans in to do the job instead of the. You'd rather Americans be going in and doing the job instead of the
We are already sending Americans to do the job, but fewer of them. That's
right. We're sending in more Afghans to do the job. Afghans to do the job.
So why doesn't the same logic apply in Syria?
It's a different country. It's a different country. What would my friend do differently? If you notice, he never answers the question.
No, we would not be going through the UN on all of these things.
You don't go through the UN.
Please talk personally about this, if you could. Congressman Ryan.
I don't see how a person can separate their public life from their private life or from their faith. Our faith informs us in everything we do. My faith informs me about how to take care of the vulnerable, about how to make sure that people have a chance in life. Now, you want to ask basically why I'm pro-life? It's not simply because of my Catholic faith. That's a factor, of course. But it's also because of reason and science. You know, I think about 10.5 years ago, my wife Jana and I went to Mercy Hospital in Janesville, where I was born, for our 7-week ultrasound for our firstborn child. And we saw that heartbeat. Our little baby was in the shape of a bean. And to this day, we have nicknamed our firstborn child, Liza, Bean. Now, I believe that life begins at conception. Those are the reasons why I'm pro-life. Now, I understand this is a difficult issue, and I respect people who don't agree with me on this, but the policy of a Romney administration will be to oppose abortion with the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. What troubles me more is how this administration has handled all of these issues. Look at what they're doing through Obamacare with respect to assaulting the religious liberties of this country. They're infringing upon our first freedom, the freedom of religion, by infringing on Catholic charities, Catholic churches, Catholic hospitals. Our church should not have to sue our federal government to maintain their religious liberties. And with respect to abortion, the Democratic Party used to say they want it to be safe, legal, and rare. Now, they support it without restriction and with taxpayer funding. Taxpayer funding in Obamacare, taxpayer funding with foreign aid. The vice president himself went to China and said that he sympathized or wouldn't second-guess their one-child policy of forced abortions and sterilizations. That, to me, is pretty extreme.
Vice President Biden.
My religion defines who I am. And I've been a practicing Catholic my whole life. It has particularly informed my social doctrine. Catholic social doctrine talks about taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, people who need help. With regard to abortion, I accept my church's position on abortion as what we call de fide doctrine. Life begins at conception. That's the church's judgment. I accept it in my personal life. But I refuse to impose it on equally devout Christians and Muslims and Jews. And I just refuse to impose that on others, unlike my friend here, the congressman. I do not believe that we have a right to tell other people that women, they can't control their body. It's a decision between them and their doctor. In my view, in the Supreme Court, I'm not going to interfere with that. With regard to the assault on the Catholic Church, let me make it absolutely clear. No religious institution, Catholic or otherwise, including Catholic Social Services, Georgetown Hospital, Mercy Hospital, any hospital, none has to either refer for contraception, none has to pay for contraception, none has to be a vehicle to get contraception in any insurance policy they provide. That is a fact. That is a fact. Now, with regard to the way in which we differ, my friend says that well, I guess he accepts Governor Romney's position now, because in the past he has argued that there's rape and forcible rape. He's argued that in the case of rape or incest, it would be a crime to engage in having an abortion. I just fundamentally disagree with my friend.
Now, I've got to take issue with the Catholic Church and religious liberty.
You have.
If they agree with you, then why would they keep suing you? It's a distinction without a difference.
I want to go back to the abortion question here.
We picked two people. We picked people open-minded. They've been good justices. So keep an eye on the Supreme Court.
Was there a litmus test on them?
There was no litmus test. We picked people who had an open mind, did not come with an agenda. The fact that this decorated soldier you talked about, fought for his country, that should be honored. He should not be thrown into a category of the 47% who don't pay their taxes while he was out there fighting and not having to pay taxes and somehow not taking responsibility. I would also tell him that there are things that have occurred in this campaign and occur in every campaign that I'm sure both of us regret anyone having said, particularly in these special new groups that can go out there, raise all the money they want, not have to identify themselves and say the most scurrilous things about the other candidate. It's an abomination.
If you were elected, what could you both give to this country as a man, as a human being, that no one else could?
Honesty? Well, no one else could. There are plenty of fine people who could lead this country.
Really? I'm going to keep you to about 15 seconds here.
Well, he gets 40, I get 15.
He didn't have
okay.
40. He didn't
right.
have 40.
Now, let me tell you, my record stands for itself. I never say anything I don't mean. Everybody knows whatever I say, I do. And my whole life has been devoted to leveling the playing field for middle-class people, giving them an even break, treating Main Street and Wall Street the same, holding them the same responsibility. Look at my record. It's been all about the middle class. They're the people who grow this country. We think you grow this country from the middle out, not from the top down.
Okay, we now turn to the candidates for their closing statements. Thank you, gentlemen. And that coin toss, again, has Vice President Biden starting with the closing statement.
Well, let me say at the outset that I want to thank you, Martha, for doing this, and Senator College. The fact is that we're in a situation where we inherited a god-awful circumstance. People are in real trouble. We acted to move to bring relief to the people who need the most help now. And in the process, we, in case you haven't noticed, we have strong disagreements, but you probably detected my frustration with their attitude about the American people. My friend says that 30% of the American people are takers. Romney points out 47% of the people won't take responsibility. He's talking about my mother and father. He's talking about the places I grew up in, my neighbors in Scranton and Claymont. He's talking about the people that built this country. All they're looking for, Martha, all they're looking for is an even shot. Whenever you give them a shot, they've done it. They've done it. Whenever you've leveled the playing field, they've been able to move. And they want a little bit of peace of mind. And the president and I are not going to rest until that playing field is leveled. They, in fact, have a clear shot, and they have peace of mind. Until they can turn to their kid and say with a degree of confidence, honey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That's what this is all about.
Congressman Ryan.
I want to thank you as well, Martha, Danville, Kentucky, Senator College, and I want to thank you, Joe. It's been an honor to engage in this critical debate. We face a very big choice. What kind of country are we going to be? What kind of country are we going to give our kids? President Obama, he had his chance. He made his choices. His economic agenda, more spending, more borrowing, higher taxes, a government takeover of health care, it's not working. It's failed to create the jobs we need. 23 million Americans are struggling for work today. 15% of Americans are in poverty. This is not what a real recovery looks like. You deserve better. Mitt Romney and I want to earn your support. We're offering real reforms for a real recovery for every American. Mitt Romney, his experience, his ideas, his solutions, is uniquely qualified to get this job done. At a time when we have a jobs crisis in America, wouldn't it be nice to have a job creator in the White House? The choice is clear. A stagnant economy that promotes more government dependency, or a dynamic, growing economy that promotes opportunity and jobs. Mitt Romney and I will not duck the tough issues. And we will not blame others for the next 4 years. We will take responsibility. And we will not try to replace our founding principles. We will reapply our founding principles. The choice is clear, and the choice rests with you, and we ask you for your vote. Thank you.
And thank you both again. Thank you very much. This concludes the vice presidential debate. Please tune in next Tuesday for the second presidential debate at Hofstra University in New York. I'm Martha Raddatz of ABC News. I do hope all of you go to the polls. Have a good evening.
Was put in charge of those negotiations by President Obama, and they failed to get the agreement. We don't have a status of forces agreement. And with respect to Afghanistan, the 2014 deadline, we agree with the 2014 transition. But what we also want to do is make sure that we're not projecting weakness abroad. And that's what's happening here. And that is what we're watching on our TV screens is the unraveling of the Obama foreign policy, which is making the world more chaotic and us less safe. On that same day, the Obama administration had the exact same position. Let's recall that they disavowed their own statement that they had put out earlier in the day in Cairo. So we had the same position, but it's never too early to speak out for our values. We should have spoken out right away when the Green Revolution was up and starting, only because we had strong bipartisan support for these tough sanctions, were we able to overrule their objections and put them in spite of the administration. Imagine what would have happened if we had these sanctions in place earlier. You think Iran's not brazen? All options are on the table. That's the point. The Ayatollahs see these kinds of statements and they think, I'm going to get a nuclear weapon. When we see that's what our entire premise of our pro-growth plan for a stronger middle class is all about, getting the economy growing at 4%, and the vice president was in charge of overseeing this, $90 billion in green pork to campaign contributors and special interest groups. There are, just at the Department of Energy, he'll tell you about vouchers. He'll say all these things to try and scare people. Here's what we're saying. Give younger people, when they become Medicare eligible, by the way, that $6,400 number, it was misleading then. It's totally inaccurate now. This is a plan that's bipartisan. It's a plan I put together with a prominent Democrat senator from Oregon.
There's not one Democrat who endorses it. Not one Democrat who signed
Our partner
the plan.
is a Democrat from Oregon.
And he said he does no longer support you for that.
We put it together with the former Clinton budget director.
Who
this
disavows it.
This idea came from the Clinton Commission to Save Medicare, chaired by Senator John Breaux. Here's the point, Martha.
Which was rejected.
If we don't fix this problem pretty soon, Barack Obama, 4 years ago, running for president, said, if you don't have any fresh ideas, use stale tactics to scare voters.
What Mitt Romney is proposing.
And then the kinds of changes we're talking about for younger people like myself is don't increase the benefits for wealthy people as fast as everybody else. Slowly raise the retirement age over time. That statistic was completely misleading, but more importantly...
They were the facts, right?
This is what politicians do when they don't have a record to run on. Try to scare people from voting for you. And where I come from, overseas, which is Lake Superior, the Canadians, they drop their tax rates to 15%. That means successful. Look,
no specifics again.
What we're saying is lower tax rates 20%, start with the wealthy,